So I'm looking at this bodice today, which dates from the early 1890s and is an example of fashionable women's dress of that time. Although we're only seeing the bodice today, the bodice originally would have been worn with a skirt, which the museum also has within its collection. So as I said, the bodice dates from the early 1890s. And we know this because of the shape of the sleeves. So later on in the 1890s, going towards the end of the 19th century, sleeves gradually began to get bigger and more pronounced in a shape called leg of mutton. But as you can see at this point, they're really quite restrained. It's really a beautiful example of early 1890s dress. The fabric is a very delicate wool mix, and as you can see, it's been decorated by hand embroidery and by lace. It would have been worn by a very fashionable woman and would have been worn as a day dress. And the reason that we know this as well, because normally silk was worn in the evening and then wools or cottons were worn during the day. And we also know this because of the length of the sleeves. Generally speaking, evening wear tended to have shorter sleeves. One of the most interesting things about this piece is that it was actually made right here in Dundee. It was made by a company called Maison Souter, who were located on Nethergate, and it was run by a woman called Mary Souter, who was active from about 1870, and her daughter took over the company and ran it up until the company closed. The fabric was retailed in Dundee by a company called Watson and Henderson that was run by a man called Alexander Henderson. And we know from advertisements for both Maison Souter and for Alexander Henderson that both of these companies were really interested in keeping up with the latest fashions of the time. Alexander Henderson in particular took frequent trips to London where you've seen all the latest fabrics that were retailed there, and then brought these fabrics back to Dundee so that the women of Dundee could have been dressed in the most fashionable styles of that time. So really just, a beautiful example of dressmaking in Dundee in the early 1890s.